Welcome to Looking Forward Show. You're watching or listening to the Looking Forward Show, and I'm Jeff Abramowitz, your host, and I'm so grateful to be here. We're here today, live streaming on Philly Cam TV. You can watch us on Xfinity 66 and 966, on Vios TV, 2930 on Roku, Apple TV, YouTube TV, and our YouTube channel, The Looking Forward Show. So great show for you today. I'm really glad to be back here. So many things I wanted to get started with. And the very top of my list was an acknowledgement that today begins Black History Month. So those that are that really want to take an opportunity to learn about our past and the culture of our country, and Black history is really a great opportunity, especially when we talk about equity, and we'll be talking about that today, equity in education. So want to call that out today. Begins Black History Month. So I hope you pick up a good book. Take a chance to really learn a little about our history. Second thing I want to mention is that we had some guests on our show a few episodes ago from You Matter. Cheryl Rice was on from You Matter Marathon. And since she came on the show, I was selected to be on their advisory board. And this past Sunday had our first board meeting. And I am so energized. What an amazing group. So if you don't remember, or you didn't watch a show, go to our YouTube channel and check out the show with Cheryl Rice. And it was all about giving and volunteering. And You Matter is really a simple thing. All it is handing out these cards, and all they say on them is You Matter. And it's just an acknowledgement that you matter, right? That it's really important that you acknowledge when people are having a difficult time, a difficult day, whatever it might be, that we just give them a little boost. And those cards can go a long way. And there's millions of them that have been passed out around the world. So I'm really excited to be part of their new board. And it's just been a great opportunity for me. And I really feel that we're looking forward to having them on again. And as the You Matter Marathon goes through the season and through the year, being able to tell you where to get those cards and to be able to hand them out. So I'll be sharing that information. We are going to be talking about equity and education today. And before we get there, we're also going to be talking with, we have a great show. We have Lou Narvaez from Pennsylvania Probation and Parole is going to be on today. Excited about having Lou on. We have Danny Huffman on from Second Chance University, and amazing story, just some incredible work they're doing in the world of education and justice and helping men and women get back on their feet. And then we also have a really good friend that I'm really proud that she's going to be on, because I've been wanting to have her on the show for the longest time. Her name is Mylena Sutton, and Mylena is going to share with us her vision on working and creating this culture of equity in not only the workplace, but also in educational settings and in the justice setting in particular. So we have Lou, Danny Huffman, Mylena Sutton. We had just a great show. So I want to spend a second just to tell you that tomorrow, and this is what kind of prompted this theme for the show today, was tomorrow I was asked by the United States Department of Education to speak at the Equity Summit. So the Department of Education, the United States Department of Education, is having this equity summit, and they're going to having workshops throughout the day. And you can Google it and check out U.S. Department of Education Equity Summit tomorrow. And it's free of charge, but just jump on. You might get some information that could be helpful. But really important in that is they're going to be talking about justice and criminal justice and equity in the justice space with education. So we'll be doing that tomorrow, and I'll be hosting a breakout session and a workshop during that. So I hope you'll have an opportunity to join us. So we're going to get to the show because we have a lot to talk about today. And I really want to, our good friend Lou Narvaez is going to kick us off, but we're going to take a quick break. Again, you're listening or watching the Looking Forward Show, and we'll be right back with our good friend Lou Narvaez. We are back at the Looking Forward Show. We're here with our good friend Lou Narvaez. Lou, how are you doing?
Oh, I'm digging out from all the snow, but I'm blessed to be here with you on the show I enjoy so much, and just having a good time with life in general.
We
All
love
praises
having
to
you.
the
We
Creator.
love having you. And
My pleasure.
yeah, so I'm really excited to talk to you about this because I know this is it's kind of a little passion of yours too. Is we talk about education, and I find myself in the center of adult literacy, justice, and workforce development. It's kind of like right where I'm right in that bullseye right there. And
Right.
education really means a lot. But when it comes to justice and justice involved individuals, I just want to go throw some things at you before we even get to you because I've been doing a lot of work around this and I speak a lot on the topic, but looking at the data, 1 out of 3 Black men without a GED or a diploma will find themselves incarcerated in their lifetime. And it's 1 out of 5 Latino men. And despite the fact that our Black and Latino populations are 13 and 18% of our entire population, the reality is that they make up over 33% of our prisons and jails. So when we talk about the blend of education and some of those challenges, the one thing that I'm really mindful of is that people that are formerly incarcerated are twice as likely not to have a high school diploma, and also the reality that they have about a 1 in 20% chance of actually completing college or post secondary, and yet. It's documented that if you take one class inside of our prisons or jails, you're at a 43% better chance of not going back. So the data clearly shows how important it is for us to be educated in our prisons and jails. So I want to throw that first softball to you, Lou. What's your take on education? And you see it more on the way out, like as people come home. But what's your philosophy on the importance of education with your parole officers and as we work with men and women as they come home?
Well, education is crucial. It is vital in the self development of any individual. However, that's being said, let's go back to some of your earlier discussion. And part of the concept of equity in education is based in some systemic problems. In 1896, Plessy versus Ferguson, the Supreme Court of the United States, they had agreed that racially segregated schools were legal as long as the facilities were equal. Here, there goes your concept of separate but equal. Fast forward from 1896, 1954, during my lifetime, Brown versus Board of Education, Topeka, Kansas. Imagine this father, Oliver Brown, he's contesting to try to get his little girl, Linda, to go to an all white school. May 1954, soon to be Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall, who was in charge of the NAACP, goes to bat. The Supreme Court in May 1955 says that it is desegregation does cause undesirable outcomes for the children, but defers to the states on how they're going to handle it because they didn't have a plan in place. Fast forward to Arkansas 9, where these 9 children were going to be sent. Imagine sending your children to a school where they're not wanted, to the point that President Eisenhower has to send in troops because the governor has National Guards to prevent them from coming into the school. So we're talking about systemic problems that exist when you talk about education. 1976, Supreme Court, Ruan versus McCoy, says that the private schools cannot select people based on race and other things. Fast forward to today, equity in education, fine concept, fine concept. However, let's keep in mind that every organization has their mission and their charge. The charge of education belongs to the Board of Education. So, am I now demeaning or belittling? No. The Board of Education ranked 472 in the ranking of schools as far as performance in state rankings. Now let's look at the DOC. The DOC charges custody and care. I've said it once and I'll say it again. We receive all the broken people. Whatever the DOC does, which they have done a lot to educate people, they're now picking up the ball where society has failed these individuals when they come to the institution. They give them a litany. I mean, a litany of courses. Kudos to the educational system, Terry Fazo and her team up at the DOC. Everything from carpentry, electrician, fiber optics, graphic arts, green environment, et cetera, go on and on. They have even become involved with the Pell Grant, and they currently have about 70 inmates participating in the Pell program, and they have a new program they're looking at with Eastern University and Chester State Correctional Institution. The crux to the equity, when we talk about equity, education equity looks at every child receives what they need to develop their full academic and social potential. The problem is you have the horizontal equity, which looks at each person to be equal in the same way. Now, you take two children in the same impoverished neighborhood. You say, oh, I'm going to be equal. I'm going to give both of you all laptops so you can do work and learn technology. Well, student A from the same neighborhood, he has Wi-Fi. Student B not only haven't had Wi-Fi, but electricity was just cut off. So the vertical equity looks at the individual and their different needs and resources. All roads lead to Rome. Poverty. We learned that in the 60s. When we start talking about poverty and how to address poverty, we can talk about educational equity. That's not, am I saying no, it's a bad thing? I think it's a beautiful thing. But we have to look at the systemic problems, what's so deep rooted in the educational system. We have to look at the failures, and we have to look at the DOC, the Department of Corrections, all that they are doing in light of their charge of custody and care and trying to offer programs. I mean, to be able to offer college courses and to pursue it and to work with the people, to try to give them a trade or a craft, all of this should have been done before they got there. And maybe if it was done before they got there, they wouldn't have got there.
So right now, Lou, I'm going to actually leave the studio. I'm going to leave the rest of the show for you. And when you're done, you can just drop that mic, right? Just drop it right there, because you hit so many good points. And one thing I love having you as a guest, because like you do your homework, like you really you come prepared, and you always educate us on really what the real perspective and how we should be looking at it, where the glasses are that we should be wearing. And what's interesting is, in Pennsylvania and across the country, look, I do work across the country now, and education is becoming a priority. And we're beginning to realize that if we don't educate men and women that are inside of our walls, that when they come home, the chances of them actually getting that education are really just not very high. And that's because so many other life things happen. You come home, you got to learn, you got a job, right? You got to work, you got to feed your family. You got all these other barriers that you're fighting with, and education falls down on that priority list. And one of the things I really want to emphasize in a lot of the work I do is that education needs to start behind the walls. And the DOC is doing a pretty good job. A lot of states are starting to do a better job at it. But there's no question that people are at a disadvantage, because when you think about it, a lot of men and women, they don't have access when they come home, right? They don't have those classes. We're going to be talking to Danny in a little bit about his Second Chance University, but, going into a university setting and never having used a computer before, right? Or those are real challenges. And I think that Pennsylvania is doing a better job as well as a lot of states. So kudos to the secretary and all the educational staff across. And it is not an easy place to be in, educating men and women that also oftentimes come in at a second or third grade reading level and trying to advance them into those careers. I'm curious though, what's your attitude with your parole officers? Is there an encouragement to get men and women that need educational support back to those support services when they come home, or where does it fall in the chain of priority for parole officers?
And I think you hit the nail on the head. It depends on the prioritization, because if you're dealing with an addiction, I can't send you somewhere to learn someplace. If you don't have a home to live in, I can't have a decent conversation with you about let's get you educated. So it depends on where you are. And this is the beauty of the vertical equity is you look at the person based on their individual needs. See, and that's the vertical equity in education. The horizontal is I'm going to assume, well, you're poor and Johnny X is poor, and you both come from the same neighborhood, and he's going to high school, getting ready to go to community college. Well, Johnny X may have a home and you don't. Johnny X may not have an addiction and you do. That's when you look at the individual circumstances. Education is a priority. I came from a generation where we pushed education. I lived through those times, with the exception of the Plessy versus Ferguson, with the Brown versus Board of Education, Arkansas 9. Those are not just something I read. Those things I heard as a child coming up in my household, where brown and black people were excluded. And this was systemic. This is something that affects the whole, that's still at the root of things going on today. That's why I say we encourage education, but we also encourage looking at the individual needs. You can't talk to education about somebody in a deep addiction, or somebody that have a job and a family looking for them to feed them.
We also got to, we're not going to change this overnight. I mean, we have to change the narrative, and we got to do it gradually by putting programs in and giving people access when they come home and really educating them. Absolutely. Absolutely. As always, Lou, you always, you always impress me that you're right on the pulse of the button of what's happening when it comes to a lot of the topics we talk about. Education on the outside needs to start inside. We know that part of it. And I give kudos to you for really making sure, I've been at some of the call-ins and other sessions where, you have educators there, making sure that people are aware that, this is what you need to be successful. We appreciate you so much. Any final words? If there's one thing you want to tell the men and women that are listening in the audience when it comes to equity in education, I'm giving you the final word on this one.
I would say to them, keep moving forward. And to truly educate oneself, you have to be true to yourself. You have to be true to yourself. You have to accept your wrong as well as you accept your right, and be about correcting it, not justifying it. And peace to all of them. And I wish them all well.
You are awesome. So, Lou, thank you so much for joining us today. As always, you're a great friend of the show, my personal friend, and we love having you on all the time. So thank you again. We're looking forward to having you on our next episode. We are you're listening to and watching Looking Forward Show. And again, we're at PhillyCam. We're live streaming on Xfinity, on Vios, Roku, Apple TV, and YouTube. And our next guest, I'm really excited about Danny Huffman from Second Chance University. And we'll be right back. Looking Forward Show. Back at Looking Forward, and we have Danny Huffman with us today, and I'm really excited about having Danny on the show. So Danny, you should know, is an accomplished dean of academic affairs, a college instructor, a writer, a career management specialist. He's the founder of Second Chance University. We're going to hear all about Danny. How are you?
I'm doing really great. Thank you. It's unfortunately it's a good 75 degrees, real sunny outside. So
yeah. I don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear that. We're still digging out of some snow up here, and I know there's more coming on the way. You're down in Florida, aren't you?
Yes.
Awesome. Well, it's good to see you. I'm just curious, where are you right now?
Right now in Sanford, in one of our classroom facilities.
Very, very cool. There's so much I want to know, and so many questions I have for you. I guess we need to know a little bit about you. I know that you're the founder of Second Chance University, which is a nonprofit. And I know also you've had a lot of other things that you've done, and including work with an organization I'm familiar with here in Philadelphia, which is ITT Technical Institute, and had done some work as a dean of academic affairs for them. But why don't you tell our audience a little bit about Danny Huffman?
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. I am born and raised in El Paso, Texas. One of the things that I remember mostly about El Paso, Texas is we lived on a farm called in Canutillo, Texas. It's a little rural area. One of the things that really came through to me in my life, and the reason why I'm sitting here today and doing what we do today, is, let me tell you a little bit about me when I was about 13 years old. Story I tell my students, it's a story that is important only because of the lessons. When I was 13, I lived on a farm, had a 1952 Chevy little red pickup truck, stick shift, and it was time for me to learn how to drive. My father, I said, hey, it's time. He let me go out there. He said, now listen, Danny, don't do like your big brother did. And whatever you do, do not hit that tree out in the road. It's about a quarter mile down. So, you know what happens? I'm driving, I'm ready to go. I see tumbleweeds getting in the way of my dirt road path. And well, we'll get to the conclusion in a little while, but let me tell you, all I could hear about what my dad was saying was don't, can't. First two letters of don't are do. So what I figured out through life is that when somebody says don't do this or you can't do that, I try to turn that around. And that's the narrative of today, is turning things around, not listening and not paying attention. Well, you got to pay attention to it, but not taking to heart when somebody says don't. And what I mean by that is the narrative of the equity of education. Individuals who are going to school, high school, even pre-high school. If a counselor says, no, you can't do that, or if a teacher says, don't you be just like your brother, he was a troublemaker, or in any family, every neighborhood, when they tell you don't and they do a lot, we need to reverse that and change that narrative from don'ts to do's and the can'ts to can. So ultimately, when we hear don't, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Second Chance University was born because of that philosophy. We don't believe in the don't philosophy. We believe that the don'ts got to go and the can'ts can't stay. So that's where we're at right now. And until we get that paradigm shift, that philosophical shift of the can't to can, then unfortunately, we are in that situation where recidivism, where problems do occur.
Danny, so so it's a great philosophy. And so I'm curious, did you hit the tree?
Unfortunately, yes. I hit the tree. And,
I figured as much.
Yeah. Well, and the reason is, when somebody says, don't do this, your mind is focused on what you don't get to do.
Yeah.
And
no,
it's so
things, true.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so true.
Just clear out.
So let's clear it out. We're going to start a new narrative here. We're clearing it out, but tell us. Yeah. So tell me, like, how did you get started in this field? I know you had done some work with ITT and started getting into the vocational training pieces of it. But what prompted the startup of Second Chance University?
Well, back in 2000, I started working for another company. I was a writer. I am a pretty accomplished writer, and started working with ITT and their professional development course. It's a TB 332, I believe. Working with individuals, became a dean, talked to individuals who were justice involved, entered into ITT and could not get employment because of their justice involvement. Back in 2012, was recruited by Christian Help and Central Florida Jobs Initiative to develop a program for individuals who are homeless and who have issues and trying to get back to work. So we developed a lot of programs for that, very successful, gainful employment, great. And then I found out, at least I was told, that those organizations, at least at the time, did not deal with justice-involved individuals. Because I've written a lot of books, I've been in the classroom, and I felt that those invisible people needed help. And that's where Second Chance University came about, based upon all of those and several other factors.
Yeah, so let's talk about a little bit about the term second chance. So I often think about second chance, and I'm not a huge fan of the term, but it definitely works here. I should tell you, a lot of my audience knows that I did a few years in the federal prison system. And while I was away, and I have the notebooks to prove this, I had thought about starting my own university. And had this great epiphany, like, I'm going to come home, I'm going to start this university, I'm going to educate people and get them smarter and get them back to work. And I was going to call it Felony University. and then somebody pointed out to me that was going to be FU, and that just wasn't going to work so well. So I canned that idea. But you really took it to the next level, which was actually starting the university. And, one of the things that frustrates me in particular about the term second chances is that sometimes men and women are on their third, fourth, fifth, or sixth chance. And I think second chance just spells it out in this case, that really it's giving somebody an opportunity to get back on their feet and do it in a meaningful way. So tell us a little about second chance. Why specifically getting involved with the justice area? There's so many other fields you could have opened the door to, whether it's the addiction support, behavioral health, all these different areas. What was your passion? What drew you to the corrections or justice space?
Well, back in El Paso, right across the street was a place called La Tuna Federal Institution. So growing up, we would go into La Tuna. We had softball games, and so we would talk with the convicts, do all of that good stuff. Ultimately, a little bit later on in our life, many of my family members, as well as direct and indirect family members, was involved with the judicial system, and not in a good way. So the experiences that we have had directly and indirectly made it very clear that those individuals need assistance. They need a way to get out of that mentality of being a victim, of learning how to recreate hope, making hope where it is worth fighting for, and giving them the tools, not just the academic tools, but more about the social school tools, the community onboarding, the employer onboarding, how to develop letters of explanation, so we can fight back these inherent discriminations against individuals who have fallen, who have made a mistake. And bringing it to this very moment, this morning I was coming into work, and one of the newscasters, it was on some big newscaster, made a complaint or made a statement that one of the top politicians was cuddling criminals. Irritates the heck out of me. What does that even mean? That's the narrative that we need to get away from. Cuddling criminals. So if society is feeling that way, and based upon our family, my family, and many other people's experiences, there is that complacency. It's a cancer of complacency that individuals who have made a mistake are either incapable or I'm just going to keep my hands away from them. So we need to employ individuals. We need to educate our community, the prison systems, and all of those different elements.
Yeah, no question that there's an equity discussion here because of the number of men and women that are Black and brown that are incarcerated. What for you is the most important thing that Second Chance University brings to the table? What are the offerings that they have? And do you have fraternities? Is it a big campus? How exactly does it all work?
Well, our particular campus, to make it clear, we're on a couple of acres here in Sanford. All of our programs are online. So let's say Philadelphia is looking for an empowerment and an educational facility, textbooks and curriculum, and case managers. We would be able to help them in that regard. We did partner with Career Source Central Florida and HVAC Technical Academy to bring vocational trades for our graduates and for our students. It's a wonderful thing there. So one of the goals, if not one of the most important goals, is, of course, to know that there is truth in creating your own educational and equity. That through our experiences with our individuals, that there is hope that can be saved and can be collected. Our core curriculum deals with vicarious learning, dealing with the looking glass self theory, because individuals who have gone into prison often don't know how to react, don't know what the other person is looking at. So we educate those individuals to understand empathy, understand and acknowledge that the other individual, the employer, the community, your family, that all of those definitely have already preconceived ideas. They know that. We know that. So how do we deal with that? How do we inoculate or desensitize? Through our looking glass self theory, through collective consciousness, visualizations, trauma-informed care. I mean, there's just so much that is involved in this program that is literally a 360-degree package for the family, for the community, for the business, and for the participant.
Yeah, that's really pretty awesome. So one of the challenges that men and women have coming home is this issue of digital literacy. So many people don't have the skill set. You know, they've never been on a computer before. They've never been able to, they don't even know really to navigate a mouse is challenging and that kind of thing, let alone when you get home having access and having your own laptop and the ability to do these programs. I remember, really funny, I remember being inside and all of the programs that were inside from that were college prep or those kinds of programs where they sent material out, they had to be done on a typewriter, one of those old typewriters with the spin wheels. And oftentimes the spin wheels, the letters would break. And the big challenge for everybody was trying to find the best wheel or making it so that their black ink could actually cross the T of the T that broke. And it was really frustrating. Not only that, but inside of prisons, the spinning wheels, as well as the cartridges and the eraser tapes, you have to pay for that yourself. They don't give that to you. So those are all things that come right out of your pocket and can be really expensive when you talk about, you know, a commissary account usually runs back to your family. But I'm a little curious about the digital literacy piece. Like, what is it that you do to help kind of get over that hurdle?
Well, one of the things that we do always is we want to make sure that they are able to understand what's going on in the digital field. We do have hard copy print. So if an individual does not have access to a computer, we definitely take care of that situation by giving them hard copies. One of the things that we've dealt with also was Central Florida, Career Source Central Florida, who do offer programs, or free programs for computer literacy. So we develop those type of community support items and create literacy teaching. Here at our campus, for individuals who don't have a lot of computer access, we do have computers here, and we encourage other partners of ours to do the exact same thing. Develop those kind of classes, those tutoring classes, and give them access.
Good stuff. Good stuff. So Danny, if my audience is out there, they're across the country and they want to know, like, how could I get some information on Second Chance University? Where are we sending them to?
secondchanceuniversity.org. We are a nonprofit. So it's second with the letter, with the number 2, secondchanceuniversity.org. You can email me at dhuffman@secondchanceuniversity.org and talk about what is going on in your environment. Understand that when we do partner with other organizations and churches and other nonprofits, we do this in a customized fashion. That if it was in Philadelphia, we would make sure that we take care of the Philadelphian demographic. So all of our material is supported through organizations that we rely on to let us understand what the pulse is that community. Awesome. Where are things needed most? Where does the narrative need to change the most? That's what we do.
Good stuff. So Danny, thank you so much for taking some time for us. I'm going to ask you to hang out in the green room for us, because we're going to bring you back towards the end of the show and share some more information about how people can reach out to you. But we appreciate you and Second Chance University and all the great work you're doing. You're listening or watching the Looking Forward show. Again, you can get us live right now we're streaming on Xfinity 66 and 966, on Vios TV 29 and 30, Roku, Apple TV, YouTube channels. And we're going to be right back with a wonderful guest. I'm really excited about this. Good friend, Mylena Sutton. We'll be right back. back at the Looking Forward Show. And my good friend, Mylena Sutton, how are you?
I'm good. How are you? How are you?
We are really well. And thank you so much for taking some time today to be on the show. So Mylena Sutton, you should know, has our Bachelor of Arts in Sociology from the University of Georgia, Master's in Public Administration from University of Kansas. She is an all-around rock star and a friend. And I'm so glad that you're on today because I've been wanting to have you on the show for the longest time. And it just was fortuitous. I think this is a good space for us to have some discussion about equity and some of the work that you're doing in really changing culture, because I think this really, when we dig deep down, it's really what it's all about. But say hello to our audience. Why don't you tell us a little bit about you?
Let's see. There's so much to tell. I'm kidding. My name is Mylena. I have run my business now since 2007, believe it or not. I feel like I've been in this a long time. And what I love about the work that I do is the fact that I see it as a kind of calling, if you will. I believe that we spend so much time at work that work needs to be a place where we actually want to go. And I like working with organizations and teams to help them create those atmospheres, that culture where people actually want to be there and feel like they can engage. And frankly, that's what I do. And when I'm not working, I'm an all-around outdoorsy type person. You can catch me, frankly, going from hiking to, believe it or not, I started taking roller skating lessons. So when I am not working hard, I am playing hard.
Are you serious? You're roller skating now too?
Roller skating.
I love it.
Because I told someone when I got done with my first lesson, I still got it.
Oh wow, that is really cool. So I love the roller skate, yeah, I will tell you that I have been a real fan of some of the work that you do when it comes to leadership and leadership theory and things like that. We're really talking about equity and education, and the show is called Looking Forward. We talk about justice, and you're no stranger to the justice world. I was wondering if you could share a little about the work you've done in the justice space.
Well, believe it or not, the way I started my first entree into doing work in the justice space was very much so unintentional. I used to be an instructor at a community college. And when I say work, the reason I call it work, I was not working in that space intentionally, but I found that there was such a large number of my students who came to my class through halfway house type programs. And in order for them to stay in my class, there was frankly just a lot of work that I had to do to help them facilitate that process. Things like paperwork. You're like, really? That's not what I do. But if I want this person in my class, I need to be able to help them. So that was my first foray into terms of dealing with just the criminal justice system, if you will. And then I started offering harassment training workshops, believe it or not, to some of the correctional facilities in New Jersey. And as a result of that, I've been working with a couple of my clients for quite some time. As a matter of fact, one client in particular, I've been doing their training with their team now for over 10 years. And it is amazing to me to see the connection between the employees and the community and some of the same challenges, if you will, that some of the people who are there for a longer stay than they'd like, some of those very same challenges that they have. If it weren't for the grace of God, many times the corrections officers are in the same boat. Maybe they are just a few different details in their life stories so that they turn out differently. But in particular, one of the things that disturbs me a lot about the work that I do is that I see two things. I see that there seems to be no meaningful way to completely get out of the cycle of dealing with our justice system. It's really hard. And if you do get out, you have a lot of support from family in terms of emotional support, financial support, and all the other things. And what's interesting, as I said before, in many ways, the corrections officers have the same challenges. They've worked these jobs for a very long time. And because of how much of the demand on their time, mandatory overtime and things of the sort, many of them are frankly in a position where they aren't in a position to leave. And that also has a major impact on the resources that are provided for the people who are there, as well as how they're treated and prepared for release.
Yeah, so it's a great point. I remember when I gave a keynote address a few years ago, and it was to the Correctional Educators Association, and they gave the keynote address. I had everybody in the room stand up, and I asked them 4 or 5 questions. I never got to the fourth question, but by the fourth question, every single person in the room had done something which could have found them inside of a federal prison because of a choice that they had made. And I think they're not immune to that. I mean, correctional officers are there tasked with a really difficult job which is really hard. It's been made harder even now during COVID because of some of the challenges inside. But it leads me to why I really wanted you on today, because I do believe that there is something we can do. And you talked about this cycle. I believe that, you eat an elephant one bite at a time. And you have to do the same thing with corrections and with all the narrative that's playing out in all these spaces of chipping away. There was a great book by Damon Santola called Change. And it's all about how you effectuate change in our society. And his theory is that change really happens from the bottom up. Like if you look at Black Lives Matter, it was a grassroots movement that really populated all the way up the ladder, so that everybody and their mother now is talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, where really should have been the narrative all along. It should be embedded in all that we do. So can you talk a little about how do we go about changing our culture when it comes to not only the way we look at it's people with choices? I would just not take it out of justice. People that have addiction issues or whatever the challenges they have. How do we change the narrative when we talk about the employment setting and the way we see people today?
I'll say there are a couple of things that come to mind immediately. I think we have to acknowledge that we're talking about people first. I use this very crude example often when I'm talking to people about how we treat people who've been inside for whatever reason. I said, so it seems to me like we've come to a place in our country where we're completely okay with throwing those people away. So in many ways, why don't we just execute them? Because the way we tether them to the system, we make it very hard for people to get their lives back. So I think the first part of it is recognizing that they're human and that we need to create space for redemption, if you will. And if we aren't okay with giving people a second chance, as a culture, we need to acknowledge that, because I think what we have now is something that's very disingenuous with respect to how we treat people who are returning. And then I think we need to deal with the realities of what it means for somebody to attempt to get their lives back on track. I mean, literally, the client that I was talking to right before I came to the show, we were talking about how we needed some employees to do some surveys to some training we done. And what we started to anticipate was, wait a minute, have we thought about literacy levels? Because we want to make sure everybody who gets this can complete it, and that we don't present it in a way that's going to be humiliating. And we have to also think about things like, okay, if we're going to do this survey, not only do we have to think about literacy levels, but some of the people on our team might not have access to cell phones. So can we get some way for them to get it on paper? And I think when we talk about what happens in workplace settings, we have to think about the real situations that folks are dealing with. One of the things I think about often as well, in order to make it possible for them to become employed, is we might need to rethink some of our policies around time and attendance. If I need to go check in with my probation officer, if I need to get health care because I have some addiction issues that I'm working on, if I need that, but my job has a situation where if I need to take time off, whether it's in small increments of time, full days, but if I can't get that time off, then you put me in a situation where I have to choose. I have to choose the health care that I need or the job that I need. Or I have to choose between the job that I need and not being able to meet the demands of my parole or probation and having to go back. And then we also need to look at how some of the rules that we have just don't make sense. Even though this one is a little bit different in terms of this example I'm about to share is a little bit different because it's not work related. I was stunned. Once I had a student was nearly 30 years old and was sent back because he tested positive for beer. Literally, it wasn't alcohol, it wasn't illegal substance. The kid had a beer. And I'm not saying that there should not be rules and protocols, But some of these things that we make people have to deal with and tolerate, I just think is a bit much. And I think we have to simply decide that we are going to create a system where restoration is possible. And then we have to think about how are we going to make it practical. Literally, when I talked about the literacy issue, the cell phone issue, there is an organization, I can't remember exactly the name of the car repair shop. It's in North Jersey. And I was reading a story about this gentleman. What he decided to do was to partner with one of the correctional facilities there, because he said that he thought his organization was great because they can be a little rough around the edges, and he has his organization set up where that's not going to offend the customer. On the other hand, he also felt like he could bring them into the organization and over time help them to develop some of those behaviors that we consider to be more professional. But he is clear about this from the very beginning, that if I'm taking someone who needs an opportunity, I cannot expect them to show up like someone who has been in corporate America or going to an office job for years. And I think we have to accept that reality.
Yeah, that's a great point. One of the things that I'm really mindful about is, as employers and people in the community, we often don't ask those questions. Like, we need to take the glasses off and we need to put on those glasses that they're wearing. And sometimes it's the silliest of things that we would never think of. Like, I get calls all the time from our participants that are just got out or getting back to work. And they say, oh, Mr. A, I don't know what to do. I'm working now, but I got no place to put my direct deposit. Like, they never had a bank account. You know, we assume that they had a bank account, or we assume that they have steel toe boots, or they're able to have those, those things they need to actually get to work, even transportation the first week, where, literally they're living, very close to the line, and getting to work sometimes poses a challenge. We need to wear those glasses. From the training end and the things that you do, what's so remarkable for me is you really are a culture changer. Like, you really want to get people thinking about those things. And in your experience and the work that you do, where does that happen? Does it happen? Does it happen? It certainly doesn't happen by calling everybody out. I had a project with Waste Management not long ago, and they were hiring returning citizens and justice-involved individuals. And someone said, well, should we give them different color vests to wear at work, like, so we can identify them? It's like, no, that's like, doesn't make any sense. You want them integrated in and treat them like everybody else. And but I'm curious, like, where do you start? Do you start at the top with the HR departments and the people doing your leadership, or do you start in the grassroots with just everyone that's in the workforce? What's your take, and how do you go about doing it?
Unfortunately, I think if you don't have someone in a leadership role or in the HR department who really cares, I think it's a hard sell. I really do think that, because the folks who are at the grassroots level, the risk that you're asking them to take is to stand up against the existing organizational culture without the benefit of authority to really push an agenda forcefully. They can agitate the system only but so much. And I think that's a lot to ask of someone when their livelihood is on the line. On the other hand, what I find when you start talking about someone in a leadership position, you have to have somebody who's really in it to win it. I tend to believe not only do you need someone who's really committed to it, but I often think those people who are committed, they come to it from a place of personal passion and conviction. Somebody they know, somebody who they love, is struggling to get their lives on track, and they see what that is like. I think that that's the only way you get it done. Because I think what happens at work, the power discrepancy is so strong that people might think that a policy is broken or counter to an organization's values, but people aren't likely to speak up about it if they don't have a certain level of authority.
Yeah, no, I agree. You have a great line in your website, and you state that people who aren't happy at work aren't happy at life. And I love that line because, we think about it, we spend so much time in the workplace day to day. And you also went on in the same paragraph, and you talked about you believe that leaders have a duty to create cultures where teams can thrive. And I believe that's so true. And I think it takes people like we had our first guest today was Lou Narvaez, District Director of Probation and Parole, was on. And he's a high-ranking official in the Department of Corrections. and comes on because he wants to break down those barriers. He wants to have this discussion. He wants to really, he wants to lean in, and he wants to lead in this space, which is really remarkable. So we appreciate you. We know that your company does work through Voltage Vista. And can you just give us, like, if somebody wanted to reach out, we have a lot of companies that listen to our stream as well as to our podcast. Somebody wanted to get hold of you, how would they go about doing it?
I'm pretty easy to find. Frankly, you can Google my name, and my name will take you to my website. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty easy to find out there. And frankly, I like to connect. So even if someone wants to have some exploratory conversations, I'm completely open to that. And I like to help leaders figure out what it is that they can do to make sure that the needs that their team has are needs that they are actively trying to address and to meet. And I realize that can be a bit overwhelming. And if they need a partner for that, I'm certainly game for that. That's work that I like to do, frankly.
Awesome. We love it. We love it. So, Mylena, I want you to hang in there for a second. I'm going to bring Danny back for the last part of our show. We have about 10 minutes left, 9 minutes left, but we'll be right back. You're listening to the Looking Forward Show. We are back at Looking Forward, and I'm so grateful for both of you to be on today. Danny, thank you so much. Mylena, thank you so much for making time today. And I just wanted to bring the discussion together because we've been talking about equity and education and its importance, and we know that is a culture change. And you know, I was really thinking a lot about this. It actually is stirred by something that Mylena texted me about regarding the real purpose behind this. Like, where does change happen, and how do we make it happen? Whether it's change through leadership, and I just believe that education is so important. That so many things start there. Like if we really want to get people out of poverty into career pathways so that they can have those supervisory and management jobs, that we need to teach them. We need to be able to make sure they read and they're qualified. I've been doing a lot of work on the infrastructure legislation and the bill that's coming down. There's a real fear that a lot of this $1 trillion that's being spent on these creation of new jobs are really not going to go to the people that need them most, because we're not going to have trained them and really gotten to a place where they can take those jobs. So Danny, from your perspective at Second Chance University, what is it that people need to know in order to take that first step to get that piece of education, and to what's the key? Give us something that we can really run home with.
Oh, that's an easy one. That was ultimately truth. The truth is that equity is not a given. I know that, and everybody knows that. We have to learn to understand how equity can become a reality. And that's going to come from your family giving you the yes, you can, not discouraging you to be a better person, to go to school, coming from our school counselors, telling the children that, yes, you can go to college. It doesn't matter where your background is or where you live. You can become, as opposed to, no, that college is not going to accept you. If you are justice involved, we need to make sure that the community understands the cost, the literal cost of an individual and the community if there is recidivism. So truth is that we need to develop pre-release programs that have aim. And if we don't, then it's gonna fail. And reentry programs with community involvement. It has to have community involvement. Without that, without businesses willing to take that chance, as you stated, we deal a lot with different companies, and they know that our graduates have that situation. And I found we hire a lot of individuals. I found that there's a lot of factors that are positive that can and will outweigh the negative once we understand everybody's perspective. So we have to understand the community, the businesses, as well as the participant.
No question, it takes a village. Like it is not just a school. It takes everyone coming together, the community, and it takes us being guided to change the narrative. And really that takes hard work. Mylena, you like work at this all the time. This is your job, is really helping people change that narrative and making that change. What pearls of wisdom, what would you say to people that are out there that really want to make a difference? They want to see this change happen. How can we push them in the right way?
Good question. I think they have to figure out what their real values are. If you are in an organization at a leadership level, you have to be honest with yourself that this is an issue that you think is important, and you need to know what your why is, because we have a tremendous need for these kinds of programs and organizations that are willing to be flexible with their culture and to frankly establish new norms in their organizations so that we can make space for people who aren't our quote unquote typical employees. And you got to know why that's important to you, because there's going to be pushback. You should expect some of that. And you should also expect a lot of patience. When you talk about organizational change and culture change, a policy is not a change. It's, something you wrote down somewhere. We're going to read it at some point. But ultimately, to be the champion for such issues is something that you got to be committed to over long term. And as you think about how you make space for individuals who are returning citizens, if you can think about how you make space for those individuals, you can create a culture that's much more inclusive, period. Because some of the challenges that they had, you might not recognize that your regular employees have some of these exact same challenges. Issues around transportation. Sometimes we have employees who we have no idea what their financial situations are, but we know, if we're honest in some of our organizations, that our wages aren't such that people are having living wages being paid, and that affects people. When you talk about your regular employee who's taking 3 or 4 buses at night to get home, taking Ubers back and forth to work, and how that affects them, how that affects their ability to deal with their children, if you can't consider that and think about how that affects them at work, you certainly can't make that consideration for people who are returning, because you now have an added disincentive, and that disincentive, frankly, is just the culture of our country that tends to reject such individuals. So I would say, if you are really looking to get started, you need to examine your values and commit to this as a long-term project. It is not instant, and you should expect some pushback.
I love it. I love it. So you said something there which struck a chord with me, which is that you need to make space. And if I was to say to make space, I'd say make space for yourself. Sit down and really be self-reflective and think about, what do I want? What's going to make me happy, both at work and at home? What is it that I say this to everybody. I wish for all the participants I work with, my staff and family and friends, that they have the same energy and passion that I have every morning when I wake up and get out of bed. And that's something that is so invaluable. It's something that motivates you. And if you could do that as you come home and as you navigate those challenges, whatever they are, justice or not, if you can just have that self-reflection and think about what really makes me happy, where is my heart, and go for it and just do it. And sometimes it's reaching out to Second Chance University, to Dan Huffman. Thank you for being on today and sharing that, and reaching out to Mylena Sutton and seeing how we can change the culture and the narrative. I appreciate both of you, and thank you so much for being on today. So we will we welcome you back again in the future. And again, I just want to say, if you want to reach Danny, it's at Danny is at Second Chance University, and Mylena Sutton is at Voltage Vista. They can both be checked out there. This has been an awesome show. Again, I want to thank both of you for being on. And remember, we're going to be on every other week. But you can listen to us tomorrow at PhillyCam, WPPM 106.5 FM. We'll be on the radio. And you can find us on our YouTube station for Looking Forward, the Looking Forward show. So it's been a great show. Thank you, Mylena. Thank you, Danny, for being on today. And this has been the Looking Forward show. We'll see you soon.
Indeed.